Hello and welcome to the Work of Thy Hands podcast, where we interview Christian creatives conversing on the ways they have seen their creative projects as co creative efforts with Christ and the nature of their work as a creative. I'm your host, Allison Ramirez, and today I'm thrilled to be welcoming our next guest to the podcast, Michael Vassallo. Michael lives in Long Island, New York, and he's always wanted to be a published author. He loves movies, music, exercising, jokes, meeting spirit filled people, and spending time with his family. After 15 years of working on Agatha's Angel, he self published it on Kindle Direct, an Amazon company, in October 2024. It's an inspirational romance novel taking place at the turn of the century in New York and Philadelphia, and it tells the story of a lonely young man discovering a new purpose in his life when he falls in love with an enigmatic woman with a history of breast cancer in her family. The book has amazing reviews so far on Amazon and Goodreads. Welcome, Michael. It's good to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Allison. Nice to be here.
Yeah, to start off, I always like to give guests an opportunity to share a little bit about yourself, how you got involved in writing, and anything you want to share about Agatha's Angel, which is your current book that you have out.
Yeah, so I guess a way to start is I've always had a daydreaming creative sort of mind since an early age when I first discovered cartoons. I would watch them, and even without paying too much attention to the plot, I would be inspired to draw pictures and try to tell stories that way, although there wasn't much plot involved. But it was how I got started. And then
Mhm.
once I learned to write, that I would incorporate speech balloons with the pictures, and then I shifted from drawing to just complete writing altogether. Then I would write like funny stories about the kids in my class and teachers, and then other kids in my class are like, "Wow, that looks like fun. I want to do what Michael's doing." So it was cool that I got to inspire other kids at lunch on rainy days when we couldn't play in the schoolyard.
Mhm.
And everybody told me how much of a gift I had, and it was just wonderful to hear that because kind of made up for the fact that I wasn't a really great baseball player, but not everybody can do everything, right?
Sure. Yeah, from a young age, then you had a love for writing, it sounds like, or creativity with cartoons. And then did you major in English or do you have any background in writing? Or how did you go from that childhood love to writing your first book?
Well, I did enter a young authors contest a few times when I was in grammar school, and that gave me a little bit of an edge. But you get into essays and you get into creative stuff like that. And when I got to high school, ironically, I fell in love with mathematics, and I said, I think I want to do this for a career. But I always had the writing in the back of my head, so I did other things like school yearbook, school newspaper. I would still write stories on the side, but then I went to college, majored in math, and I wrote newspaper and yearbook articles here and there. It wasn't that much, but then before I graduated from college, I also fell in love with another thing, campus ministry. Villanova's a Catholic school, and that became a major eye-opener for me. The different things that the students did going off campus, Habitat for Humanity projects, choir, retreats, stuff like that. So I got to experience life outside of the campus a little bit, and it's opportunities like that that inspire you to grow a little bit more and meet more people that have a unique way of looking at things. And you're like, wow, I think I just grew an extra 4 inches because this is all new to
Yes.
me and this is really cool. Campus ministry in college became my life, meeting the people through that and learning about their experiences in life and how they were fearless in terms of sharing their unique gifts with the world. So that inspired me to explore that gift as well. And when I graduated, naturally I was sad to leave all of them, but I told myself, "Look, you're now aware of this new spark inside of you. So whatever you do, don't let it go out. You need to share that with the world. This is a brand new creation of you as a person. So be proud of that and share that with the world. Yeah, you're going to have a career and pay bills, but don't forget about this. This is really cool." So after college, I would bounce around to different church groups and try to relive the experience as best I could. Although it's kind of hard for a 23-year-old to mix in with a bunch of 35-year-olds. It was all I had at the
Mhm.
time. I just kind of did the best I could. But then I found this one group in the town, not the town where I live, but about a half hour away from me. And it looked almost identical to Philadelphia, which is not far from where Villanova was. And
Mhm.
Philadelphia was a city I grew attached to while I was in college, both inspirationally speaking and also spiritually speaking. So here I am in this town, and I'm like, this reminds me of where I went to school.
Yeah.
So I was prompted to spend more time out there. And it just so happened that there was a young adult group that was starting, and I got in touch with the leader, and he told me a lot of great things about it. I'm like, wow, I got to join. So I did, and I met people through there, and I did things with them, more Habitat for Humanity and outreach stuff. So it was a way of keeping that Villanova spark alive. And then I got this job in Manhattan, and the only way I could get there was by commuting by train. So this town, Rockville Center, which is where this group was, it was closer to the city than where my house was. So the leader said to me, why don't you drive out here in the morning on days when we have our meetings, and you could take the train from here so that when you come back after working, you step off the train, and instead of having a half-hour drive to the meeting, you just step off the train and the building's right here. I said, that's a good idea.
Mhm.
So in which actually happened to be Earth Day, it was a rainy day, and because of the rain, I was a little delayed in getting to the train because of traffic. So I
Mhm.
said to myself, "Uh-oh, I'm not gonna get on the train that I originally planned, so I'm gonna be late. My boss is gonna have it in for me." But the one silver lining about that day was when I stepped on that train, even though it was a later train, there was a very interesting person, and we eye contact, a young girl, probably about my age, and we started talking, and we were smiling, and I think she could sense that I was feeling a little lost at that time. I didn't really have a great sense of direction, but when you're
Mhm.
25, you're not really expected to have a whole lot of direction. But I was just in a shuffle, and both of my grandparents had died, so I was kinda out, and I had gotten my heart broken recently, just feeling lonely. Part of me thinks that she kind of suspected something was up with me, and she's like, "Oh, maybe I can try to cheer this guy up." At least that's my thought anyway. I don't remember who said what first, but as we were talking, she started making interesting observations about me, like, "You know that a person's eyes are the gateway to their soul?" And I'm like, "Yes, somebody did tell me that once." She goes, "Well, I'm looking inside your eyes right now, and I could tell you have a beautiful soul." I'm like, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah, do people ever tell you that?" I'm like, "Yeah, they have." I thought it was interesting that a complete stranger was telling me this. What
Right.
the heck? It was a nice compliment. And then she said something like, "You're very different from other people." I'm like, "I'm very different? What do you mean?" She goes, "You're real, genuine, and sincere." I'm like, "Oh, okay. I guess that's a compliment." So we were talking a little bit more, and then I noticed that she's handwriting something in this little pocket-sized book. And then we get off the train in Manhattan, and she says, "I'm so glad I got to meet you. And I know that circumstances were different and you were planning on taking a different train, but if you took the train you normally took, we wouldn't have met." So then she patted me on the hand, and I'm like, "Okay, where are you getting at?" So without even flinching at my question, she just handed me the book
Yeah.
and basically told me, "God bless you." And after that, she was gone. I never saw her again.
Mhm.
And I'm scratching my head saying, "Who the heck was that?"
Yeah.
So then I opened the book that she gave me. It was a pocket-sized Gospel of John, and I opened up the front cover, and there was the most beautiful handwritten note from her, telling me about God having a purpose for my life and keep being true to myself, keep being true to Him, and keep smiling, and He'll never give up on you. And I'm like, this is nice. I didn't really spend a whole lot of time dwelling on it. I forgot about it for a while. It's done on with my life. And 7 years after the incident, I remembered it. And I'm like, wow, that was really cool. You know what? I think I'll write a story about that. So one day I was at work and I was on my lunch hour and I started coming up with ideas based on this random encounter on the train. So I started writing ideas down and I'm like, I'm going to write a fictionalized account of this. So then I came up with one of my favorite times of the year at the time was October, Halloween, fall fests and spooky stuff like costumes and everything. And the cool air in the autumn, and I'm like, "You know what? I want this story to take place in the fall." It doesn't have to be completely in the fall, but I at least want some scenes to take place in the fall. So one thing led to another, and I'm like, "What else happens in the fall besides Halloween?" October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and I remember my wife telling me that she had breast cancer in her family, and I decided to use that in the plot. I'll do a little bit of research. I didn't know much about breast cancer, so I started reading not too much about it, but little things here and there because I wanted to add believability to this character. And I made it so that the main character, whose name was Amy, was very knowledgeable about the disease. And then I added more depth to it by saying that her mom died from it when she was 2 years old.
Mhm.
She was orphaned by the fact that her biological parents were dead, or at least her mother was, and her dad was missing in action somewhere. But her mom's sister, her aunt, said, "We'll take her in, we'll raise her," because her aunt and her uncle didn't have biological children of their own. They took her under their wings and they raised her in the Catholic faith because religion was a big thing. And they were actually immigrants from El Salvador. So the aunt and the uncle and the grandparents moved from Florida up to New York and raised Amy there.
Mhm.
Coincidentally, only a half hour away from John, the main male lead character, who at the time he met Amy was at a crossroads in his life and met her on the train and they met and they fell in love. And she told him about her family with breast cancer history and how Catholicism was big in their lives, just like in El Salvador, Catholicism is a pretty big thing.
Mhm. Yeah.
As evidenced by the 1980, there were nuns from Marinol volunteers, and they were killed, and Archbishop
Yeah.
Romero was assassinated,
Mm.
but the people remained strong. And
Yes.
Amy's family happened to be lucky enough to get out of there before it got to the point.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
then the mother died, and of course it was a setback. But again, they used it as a means to make them strong and continue the faith and raise Amy
Mhm.
the same way.
Yes. Yeah, I love how your story is based on a experience that you had all those years ago, and that you were able to turn that chance encounter seemingly into this full-fledged book that you
Yes.
published last year. So, you mentioned that it took you 15 years to get the book from start to finish. So, maybe tell us a little bit about that process, what that looked like for you on what was your writing approach, since you have the background in mathematics and also your love for, cartoons and writing. So, what happened over the 15 years of drafting the book?
Well, as I just mentioned, Allison, I first started writing ideas down that one day at work, and
Yeah.
that was July 2009.
Okay.
And after a while, I started picking up a momentum, and I'm like, you know what? I'm really liking this. And I became more and more serious about turning it into something. And I had always wanted to be a published author, but that had been on the back burner for so long. And I'm like, you know what?
Mhm.
This time I'm going to do it. So I kept
Yeah.
writing when I could. It was very hard because, um, I was in graduate school also at the time. So that took up a lot of my time. Married, still enjoying a social life and working and a lot going on. But I said to myself, this was something that I wanted to incorporate in my life more fully and more seriously. Don't let this spark go out either. So
Yeah.
I would write when I could. It was either lunch hours or it was at night when I had energy or, when I could, weekends here and there. It got a little more complicated when I was trying to wrap up graduate school and I had a family, and as they grew, their needs grew and became more demanding. So it did get a little tougher. But once I finished graduate school, the peak time for me writing was during the day on my lunch hour.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
being that I didn't have to use my lunch hour to study anymore, I would use my lunch hour writing. And I had gotten my workout at the gym done before starting the workday. So that gave me
Mhm.
energy, and knowing that my lunch hour was completely free to devote to writing. I wrote at lunch steadily, I would say from probably 2011 through the beginning of 2017, 45 minutes a day.
Okay.
And it was a lot and a lot of ideas and, you know what, let's do this. Nah, let's take that out. No, let's do this instead.
Mhm.
No, you know what? Let's go with the original idea. Let's go back to this. Character development, research, a lot of research. And I would give myself one day every quarter where I would say, you know what? I'm going to take a personal day. Hopefully my boss will say yes. And I'm going to venture into the town where Amy's from, which was a real town, based on the conversation I had with my Amy on the train all those years ago. So I would spend time in those towns getting experience and getting inspiration, getting familiar with the layout of the town, getting familiar with the interior of the churches. And over time doing that, I was aware of a spiritual aura coming from those towns and coming from those churches and filling up me on the inside. And I'm like, this is really
Mhm.
cool. This is like not only am I getting inspiration for the book, but I feel like I'm growing internally on a spiritual level outside of the book, but because of the book too. So
Mhm.
it became
Yeah.
a different dimension for me to explore. And I was changing and I felt like it was humbling, but at
Mhm.
the same time, making me happier and telling me, you really, really have to finish this. So I infused that into the book, and I would use the local library in those towns, and I would get even more done. And over time, even though I loved the process so much, and I loved my story, and my characters started to feel like my children because I was spending so much time with them, it almost became a thing where, all right, when am I going to get done? People see me at lunch, sitting down, working on this thing. They're getting curious. They're getting antsy. Michael, are you done? We want to read it. Michael, are you done? What's the story here? No pun intended. I'm like, guys, this takes time. But they didn't fully understand. And after a while, even I was starting to realize I didn't understand that there was more to this than I thought.
Mhm.
But it's because it was the first time in my life I was taking it this seriously.
Yeah.
But I was persistent and I was patient. And then I started getting a little frustrated, but I still knew if I was going to rush, it wasn't going to be the way I wanted it. So I had to keep being patient, even though I was starting to hate being patient.
It sounds like you were having a spiritual journey as well, along with the characters and through that process of writing them and working on your lunch breaks. So, yeah, even though it took you that 15 years, it sounded like you had a lot of growth as well in yourself, not just the characters and writing their world. You mentioned there's some Christian themes in the book, and we know Amy and John are your two protagonists, and it takes place in the early 2000s. How does themes of faith inspire the work or that 15-year process as you were working to write it?
Part of my journey when I would take those days off from work, I would spend a lot of time visiting different churches and just
Yeah.
seeing. You ever notice when you walk into a different church, you get a different feel from maybe your own parish?
Mhm.
So that uniqueness is like, wow, this is cool. Like, obviously, it's God's house, but like, what is it about this church that so different and so intriguing from my own parish or from the church I visited 3 weeks ago or last Sunday or whatever? I paid attention to this unique feeling.
Mhm.
So I would pay attention to the way I felt or the seat or just I guess the structure of the church, the interior, the way it was lit up, the way it was painted on the inside, where the baptismal font was, like even little minute details like that. And I would somehow, some way, a story or a part of a story or a part of the story would jump out at me from that. And I would say, wow, I got to include that. I would think I want to have a scene in my story where my characters are in this church and something happens to them while they're in here, just like something's happening to me right now while I'm in here.
Mhm.
Even if it's just looking at a statue of Our Lady of Lourdes or a statue of Our Lady of Fatima
Yeah.
or a picture of the Last Supper or that red candle by the altar that lets you know that the presence of Jesus is right there.
Mhm.
Anything, something outside the window, like the neighborhood outside the window, like having that as like a backdrop as in the horizon, all those things. And when you're a writer, and I'm sure you understand, you being a writer too, like scenery can do that to you. Certain sounds can do that to you, certain feelings. Or
Yes.
maybe even, maybe you had an uncle that wore, let's say, Old Spice cologne, and you smell Old Spice cologne one day when you're in the mall, and you're like, "Oh, Uncle Tim, I miss him. Oh, I'm gonna write about it." And it could be anything like that that just sets you off in a very positive way, of course, and you wanna infuse that.
Definitely. What we encounter and the people in our world and the things we experience finds its way often, I think, into our writing, whether or not we intended it to. Yeah, I remember there was a scene in your book where I think Amy and John weren't they visiting like a relic of a saint?
Yes, well, Agatha's Angel, as you may remember, is the title comes from Amy's devotion to Saint Agatha because, as I mentioned, Amy's mother died from breast cancer, so naturally everybody in Amy's family is on high alert. "Oh my gosh, we carry the gene. One of us could die." So,
Mhm.
when after Amy's mother died and her aunt took her in, they said, "You know what? Let's move up to New York. Let's go to Sloan Kettering. Let's be near Sloan Kettering," which is renowned for cancer patients. So, they wanted to be near the hospital just in case. And
Yeah.
luckily, Amy's aunt never got breast cancer. Amy herself never got breast cancer because they learned from having lost the mom, okay, we want to take treatment more seriously. We want to take breast cancer research more seriously so that the
Mhm.
same thing doesn't happen to us.
Yeah.
And St. Agatha is the patron saint of breast cancer in the Catholic Church. So Amy's mom was devoted to her. Then Amy and her aunt started picking up the devotion, and even something as simple as John's birthday falling on February 5th, which is St. Agatha's feast day,
Mhm.
causes Amy's eyeballs to light up like, wow, that's a sign, John. So because Amy admired St. Agatha so much and felt inspired, not only who she's the patron, what she's the patron saint of, but also her virtue, her chastity. So Amy herself wanted to be virtuous and chaste.
Mhm.
So it just so happened that Saint Agatha had some relics in Catania, Sicily, where she was apparently martyred,
Mhm.
and the archbishop, prior to the start of the novel, now this is fictitious based, but he decided to keep the relics there. Now, in 2002, when Catania, Sicily got a new archbishop, and that was true, that was historically accurate, by the way.
Okay.
Salvatore Bristafi, I think his name was. It's in the
Mhm.
book, but I made it so that in the book, he decided, you know what? There's a lot going on between September 11th. Let's give the Catholic Church something positive to think about. Let's bring those relics of St. Agatha over to the United States and they can venerate them. So he came up with this idea a bunch of churches along the east coast of the United States that are named after St. Agatha. He wanted to display the relics there. And
Mhm.
it just so happened that there's a church in Philadelphia, St. Agatha St. James, and at the time that that relic was gonna be exposed at that church in Philadelphia, John and Amy were also preparing for the breast cancer race in Philadelphia. So Amy's like,
Mhm.
"Why don't we piggyback our trip and our training for this race and incorporate visiting that relic in that church while we're down there?" And John said, "Sure, that's a great idea." And while they're in that church, Amy approaches the relic and she feels St. Agatha's presence going into her. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, something wonderful has happened." And she actually believed that she felt that St. Agatha cured her of the breast cancer gene and healed her ankle. Because remember, at the time, she had gotten hurt and her ankle got sprained and she couldn't run in the race. And she and John were upset about that, but John ran in her place.
Mhm.
But St. Agatha healed her ankle. And she's like, "Great, now I can walk again and we can continue touring the city. How great is that?"
Yeah, I remember when I was editing the book for you, yeah, that was one of my favorite scenes was when she had that encounter with Saint Agatha's relic or before the race. So, the book's been out for a little over a year now.
It
And what's
has.
been the reception? Have you been able to sell a lot of copies? Have you been getting a lot of good feedback from your readers on what they think of the story?
Yes, Allison, I have made a considerable amount of sales. I mean, not enough so that I could be the next Dean Koontz, but you know what? The book is still kinda young, and who knows what'll happen. I mean, I'll admit I could spend more time promoting it. I'd like to spend more time promoting it. But yes, I have sold between ebook version and actual physical hard copy version, I've sold over 200 copies.
That's great. That's really good.
Yes, and
Yeah.
right now I have 53 reviews on Goodreads, most of
Mhm.
which are 5-star, which I love. I have 20 reviews on Amazon, most of those are 5-star also. Yes, you get the occasional 4-star. Yes, you also get the occasional 3-star. But overall, yes, reception has been good. Reception has been positive. I've had people tell me that they had a hard time putting the book down, so that was reassuring. I've
Mhm.
had people tell me, "What happens next to Amy and John? Are you writing another book? Are you gonna write a sequel?" Well, I mean, I've thought about a sequel. I've even thought about a prequel novel. I mean, just like Star Wars, what started out as one little idea from George Lucas, I mean, here we are 5 decades later, it's become like a whole universe, a whole franchise, and they're still making movies, so
Yeah.
I like to think Agatha's Angel can be a big universe like that as well, hopefully.
Mhm. Okay, so then have you started writing anything else in the Agatha Angel universe yet, or other types of things you've been working on since publishing the book last year? Or mostly are you just in the idea stage?
So nothing on Agatha's Angel, no sequel, no spinoff, no prequel, but I did start writing something else, which is unrelated.
Mhm.
That's sort of been on the back burner though, but hopefully, look, we got a new year coming up. One of my resolutions could be, "Hey, Michael, come on. Don't forget your dream. One book is good, but don't stop there."
Mhm. That's great. I like how you've always had this love for writing, and even though it sounds like professionally you went down a different career path, you've been
Mhm.
able to always have writing be a part of your life. And then publishing this book and getting such a great reception, and then, yeah, planning to continue writing for the future. You shared some advice that you had for other creatives. You said, develop an attitude of stick to itness. I like that. The world can
Mhm.
be noisy and fast paced, so don't let that stand in the way of you pursuing a simpler life if that's what you want. Go for your dreams and don't be held back too long because of cynical realism. So I think
Yes.
that's really helpful feedback. Is there anything you want to elaborate on that for those other authors or Christian creatives who are listening to this episode? Your encouragement to them.
As a matter of fact, yes, Allison. When I was going through graduate school, I have an MBA in finance, but ironically, one of my favorite courses in the program was a course on entrepreneurship.
Hmm.
And that was actually one of the last classes I took before graduating, and I'll never forget this. The professor, who was so hilarious, I mean, you couldn't wait for the class to start, and when the class ended, you didn't wanna go home. I mean, he just made it so interesting and so fun, and he tried to instill in us, "You can do whatever you want," and he said, "If you don't remember anything from my class, remember this: 92% of the working world consists of people who are followers. The remaining 8% are people who are leaders. What percentage do you want to fall into?" Well, of course, the 92% is the wider road, and it seems to be the easier road. But those of us that are in the 92% category, yes, they have the comfort of a steady biweekly paycheck and benefits. But I'm sure that there's quite a number of them looking at the remaining 8% saying, wow, I wish I had their courage to go off on
Hmm.
my own and make this happen and be successful. And I mean, even before I took the class, I'm like, yes, writers are individualistic. Writers don't follow the crowd, and that's okay. But I always kind of wanted to do my own thing. And when I took this class, here's this guy telling us you can do what you want. The world is naturally drawn towards comfort and staying in that comfort zone. But if you're strong enough and brave enough and daring enough to try to break into that 8%, I think you should.
Hmm.
I have a lot of responsibilities with 2 children that are developmentally differently abled, I should say. I
Hmm.
love them to death, but there are a lot of challenges with autistic children and a lot more demands, just married and parent life in general, and working and bills, but I did not wanna let this dream fade, and I know that a lot of times I was at odds with the demands of all that other stuff, but
Yeah.
I wanted to get this book out. I wanted to, and I just didn't wanna let that die because for me to not pursue that, a part of me would have died, and I would have regretted it forever. And I'm like, "No, no, I'm sorry." You
Hmm.
know, the bills will still be there, the family will still be there, the job will still be there,
Hmm.
and somehow I made it work. And if we all can, I believe, we just have to try.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's great advice. And yeah, you're right. Prioritizing the things that matter too, especially these dreams that we have. And even if it takes a while to get there, like you were just chipping away bit by bit, on your lunch breaks, working on Agatha's Angel. And then as time progressed, you got more and more of the book written and revised and edited. And then now you're a published author, which was the dream it sounds like you had since you were young. I can relate a lot to that with being courageous to step out and take a leap. Because with my Trinity Tree Publishing, which is my larger small business, that this podcast is a part of it, and my editing services and writing my own books. And it was a number of years of working in the working world. And I finally said, well, I'm going to try to pursue this more full time. And it was scary at first, especially with that comfort, leaving that comfort of a 9 to 5 job. And yeah, I'm working part-time at a parish, but otherwise, this is what I do all day, and I just love it, and it definitely was a risk, but it's one that I think was worth it, and, I like your all the advice that you had to share. I think writers should be not afraid to step out and write that book.
I think too, Allison, as we get older, we realize what other people think of us is not so important because if we're constantly in that rut of pleasing others and going along with what the world wants, we're not going to be happy with ourselves. And if we at least have some sort of an individualistic flair and it can be at odds with the world, okay, well, yeah, if we get a negative reaction to that, it's a little hurtful, but you sort of have to go through that so that the more of it you get, then you tend to shrug it off and
Right.
have that mindset. Look, I need to do this because this is my gift. And
Mhm.
as you get older, you start to think, what if this is a gift God gave me? And if I'm not carrying it out because the world is trying to be too quote unquote realistic, then God's not going to be too happy with me. I'm not going to be too happy with myself.
Mhm.
So you learn to shrug it off, like stick to itiveness, be
Mhm.
stubborn. Look, this is what I have to do. And I need to be authentically happy because if I'm not authentically happy, I'm not being the best version of myself. People are
Mhm.
gonna get, sort of like a half good version of me, and I'm not carrying out my mission of
Mhm.
spreading happiness and spreading encouragement.
Yep.
So keep doing it. I wouldn't recommend get into the ring and argue with people who don't think the same about it, but in your mind, think to yourself, yeah, right. This person is going to stand in my way. I don't think so.
And not being afraid to use the gifts and talents that God's given us, because a lot of times we can find ways, excuses or ways to hold us back from using our gifts, to bless others.
Sure.
And yeah, not letting the negative voices get to you, but following, God's call and where he's leading you. It was great to hear your behind the scenes process, especially as being able to have been a proofreader for your book, to hear its conception. And hopefully, readers are interested in checking out a copy of Agatha's Angel, which it's on Amazon. And is it on your website as well?
Yes. Well, actually, they can get onto Amazon through my website, and it'll take them. There are several links on my website to Amazon, and they can get the book that way.
Perfect. Well, those of you who are listening today, go ahead and check the show notes, which has a link to Michael's website as well as his email if you'd like to reach out to him and stay connected with his future writings. As always, we will conclude with a closing prayer, which is Christian Creatives taken off of Catholic Creatives website. Breathe breath into so much dust. Let me lament for forgetting daily to rise up out of the clay. Free me from the deceit of the mundane and from the lure of comfort which dulls all my given edges. Most of all, light of my life, forgive my blindness, open my eyes, and salt me with newness and dreams. Fire my soul with your inventive flame. Let me be committed to the world by it and find in it the deepest joy. Universal creativity flow through me, faith to see things not yet seen, hope to overflow broken cisterns, and love to free me forever. Flow, O river, from the holy temple, through my mind to my hand, infuse my work with spirit to feed hungry souls. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.